If your food's contaminated, that's one thing. You're cooking your food on something that's contaminated, that's another. You're putting personal care products on your skin every single day, multiple times a day, that's another thing. You can see how this adds up very quickly without even really realizing it. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 55 of the Clean Kitchen podcast. If you listen to maybe not our previous episode, but maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we talked about Bonza and the chickpea pasta and the glyphosate. And then 2 weeks ago, we talked about these contaminants, these heavy metals in salt. All these studies and articles and reports are coming out about all these foods being contaminated with different chemicals. So Kevin and I, we were talking the other day, we were like, how are these levels actually determined? How are these safe levels determined? Because you hear, oh, if this food contains X amount of glyphosate, if it's below this amount, then it's safe. I've read articles saying that no amount of glyphosate and no amount of other chemicals in our food is safe. So Kevin and I were like, how are they determining these safe levels? So we dug into it, and what we found was pretty shocking. It shocked me. I know it shocked you as well, Kevin. So let's get into this. This is super interesting. This episode is going to have a lot of information, but stay with us because I think you're going to be shocked as well.
100%. And before we even start talking about how it's determined, we need to start about what they're looking at. And it isn't like there's a list of 100 or 200 chemicals that the FDA is regulating. There's over 40,000 chemicals in our food and water supply. This is a massive endeavor to understand, one, which of these chemicals are safe, and then two, how they interact with each other. That's really important. We're going to talk about that. So let's get into the actual science of it. So taking even a step back first, this is all regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. At least here in the US, it is. We'll talk about what it looks like elsewhere outside of the US. But for purposes of the US, the FDA regulates and governs all of the food that we put in our body. So if we want to just compare the FDA to something like the pharmaceutical industry, when you think about the pharmaceutical industry, all of the drugs that go through the regulations and the approval process, that takes years. There are an incredible amount of studies done. There are so many different phases that they have to go through, round 1, round 2, round 3, in order to get to market. And so that it's a very lengthy process from when you start with an idea for a drug to when it actually gets onto the market. The FDA and chemicals in our food is the complete opposite. Mm-hmm. It basically gets discovered and then they put it in our food without any sort of testing. And the reason that this happens is because of something called the Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976. It's horrible. Anyone that looks at
what
this...
What is it?
Yeah, anyone that studies this, it's horrible. But it's basically a control act that was put in place that allows the manufacturers of these different chemicals. So an example would be Teflon. Teflon was created by a company called DuPont. DuPont, it makes the frying pans. And Teflon is on the frying pans. It's the nonstick coating. What happened was when DuPont made this new chemical, they didn't have to do any testing around it. Or they did, and they said it's okay. They just told the FDA that it's okay without truly understanding the consequences of what would happen. And it was just put on the market. And the FDA said, okay, you told me it's okay, probably okay. And it went on the market. But it turns out Teflon is horrible for us.
Terrible.
We should not be consuming Teflon through our food. Actually, side note, they made a whole movie about this. The movie name, it's called like Black Water.
Dark Waters?
Dark Waters, yes. Because of how crazy this story is. So all of these chemicals really push to the 1976 Substances Control Act. There's actually only about 2% of these chemicals, 200 chemicals about, that are really understood by the EPA and the FDA. Everything else, kind of a wild, wild west.
200 out of 40,000.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, that's shocking. And okay, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So basically, the step-by-step process is a company will invent basically a new compound, a new chemical we'll stick with the Teflon example in this case. DuPont invents this chemical, this new compound. The FDA then comes to them and they're like, hey, is this harmful? Like, have you done any studies or anything that show that this is harmful? The company may or may not have done their own studies or scientific analysis in some way or data analysis. And then they may or may not have to disclose that to the FDA.
it seems like they have to do it, but they don't have to disclose it. And they can just tell them, yeah, the results we're good.
Okay. And so then they're like, yep, we're good. Like Teflon's safe. It's good to go. And then it goes into market, and then the consumers are poisoned by Teflon.
That's it. That's it. And you think it's crazy. And it is. It is. What you're thinking is absolutely right. I was shocked when we went and studied what this actually looks like underneath the hood. It is crazy. The US, the way that we're set up, we rely on companies to perform their own testing and then inform the FDA whether or not it's toxic, which is just the complete opposite when we look at the pharma industry, something like that, highly regulated. The USDA is heavily involved throughout the process. The FDA is a very light touch organization.
That's insane. And for those that don't know, Teflon, like Kevin said, is the nonstick coating on a lot of pans. It's banned now because it's been shown to cause cancer and birth defects and so many other problems. But it was on the market and being sold for years before it was finally taken off because it was found to have all of these negative effects. So this is just one example, I think, of many that we've discovered. But then I also think there's so many other chemicals out there that are being sold, that are in food, that are in personal care products, and the list goes on and on, that are extremely dangerous to humans.
Yeah, that's a great point on the personal care products, cosmetics, makeup, shampoo, deodorant. I don't know if food isn't being regulated very heavily, the ingredients in food and the chemicals that our food comes in contact with. I can't imagine personal care products is anywhere close to being as regulated. So that's even scarier and even makes you want to be even more careful of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that's that. Going back to this safe limit, how is this safe limit of glyphosate determined? Safe limit of heavy metals, whatever chemical it is. How is this safe limit determined that I keep hearing about and that people respond to in my comment section? If I'd say, hey, if you're going to buy oats, make sure you go for organic, make sure you go for ones that are glyphosate free. And then I'll have people tell me, but Kyle, if it's below this amount of glyphosate, then it's perfectly safe. Is it? Is it perfectly safe? How is that safe level determined?
Yep. I've got a story for you here. So glyphosate,
I love stories.
The tolerable amount for glyphosate, 0.1 to 400 parts per million. On its own, doesn't really mean anything to me. So let's understand where they come up with that number. They go into some sort of laboratory. This is for those 200 chemicals that they do regulate closely. And they look at an animal. Usually they choose a rat. The rats, they get the brunt end of all of these testing. I feel like they're just the guinea pig for everything.
They are.
So they are. They take a rat and then they expose the rat to a very small amount of the chemical. We'll start with glyphosate. So they give the rat a little bit of glyphosate and then they sit and watch for any sort of behavioral abnormalities to understand how the glyphosate is impacting the rat. If the rat looks okay, then they give it a little bit more glyphosate. They want to understand basically what's the breaking point of this poor rat before it starts to have issues. And when they do, eventually they do find a breaking point when the rat is starting to act funny, and they multiply that number. Let's say they gave it like 3 doses of glyphosate. They multiply that number by a safety factor, which is the difference between like a rat and a human is how it's described, which is crazy. So normally they just multiply it by 300. There's a 300 doses would be harmful for a human, but that doesn't account for so much types of information that we could talk about. But that is how they come up with the number. They just give a rat dosage. They keep increasing the dosage until it is harmed in some way, whether it dies or it just starts acting funny. And then they multiply by a safety factor. And that is how these different chemical levels of safety are determined.
So they're literally just watching the rat until maybe it looks like it's going crazy or looks like it's about to die or looks like it's sick, something like that. But they really don't know what's going on inside the body, even at one dose. Say they give the rat 1 dose of glyphosate and they're like, oh, the rat looks perfectly fine. But what's actually going on inside the body?
I would hope they're doing like they're pulling its blood, testing that.
Right.
It doesn't seem like they are. They're kind of just watching and studying it and trying to understand. But there are so many things that you miss when you do this. If you just think about this, And think about the second order impacts of this type of test for this rat and then comparing it to humans. The first thing, it ignores any long-term health effects. They're just testing the glyphosate or any other chemicals on this rat for a short amount of time, seeing how it reacts. What about if it takes years for something to have an impact? What if we're looking at a chemical that it can sit in our body dormant for 3 years? Are they watching this rat for 3 years to really understand if this chemical can have a long-term impact? I don't think so. I don't think they are.
No.
So it completely ignores the long-term effects of these chemicals.
Good example of that is PFAs, which we've talked about on this before, but it's known as the forever chemical because it just stays in our body. Our body doesn't really have the ability to detox it, get it out of our body, basically. And that's, like we've mentioned, found in nonstick coating pans, a lot of personal care products, the material on rain jackets, things like that can all get absorbed through the skin. So that's a perfect example of, you may not notice an immediate impact, but if you're constantly exposed to it over years and years and years, not a good thing.
Not at all.
Okay, so the first problem is the long-term effects of these chemicals. What else? What else is wrong with this approach, I guess?
So there's something called a bioaccumulation, which is basically over time within our body, similar to long-term effects, but it's accumulating whatever chemicals are accumulating inside of our bodies, and they don't really study the impacts of that. So not necessarily it takes time, but it can just build up within our body. So there's this thing called bioaccumulation that isn't studied when you're looking at a rat in this way. The next thing I'd say is that it misses subjective experience. So this is really interesting. If you're looking at a rat, and even if you are measuring its blood levels or you're just observing it, you're not understanding how it feels. And that sounds funny, but think about humans. Anxiety is increased over the last 50 years. Depression has increased over the last 50 years. More and more of these impacts to humans with our increased exposure to these chemicals has increased as well. ADD, we've talked about before. When you consume a lot of red dye 40, you're more likely to show signs of ADD. And it's not actually something that's wrong. It's just you're being exposed to these toxic chemicals over a long period of time. So they're not really understanding the rat. And that sounds crazy, but that's really what it is here.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was thinking. Like they're just sitting there observing it, but they don't know what's going on the inside. Like you said, they don't know how the rat feels, I guess, which sounds weird, but is true. Do they have a headache? Are they anxious? You don't necessarily know from looking at someone. You're like, oh, that person is anxious. I can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can, but maybe you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know what's going on inside of the body.
No.
Okay. What other problems are with the way this is set up?
Yeah. The other thing is that we'll refer to as exposure timing, which is how often are you being exposed to this new chemical? If it is just a one-time thing, maybe it's fine. But if it's something like glyphosate's in so many food products. And if you're having it 3 times a day, every meal, then that can have an increased risk. It's not going to be the same when you just give a rat some sort of dosage and then wait a period of time and give it another dosage. It's very different if it's something, like you said, that you're consuming or being exposed to consistently. How many people cook with nonstick pans for every single meal, maybe even multiple times within a meal? So you're just building up your exposure to these chemicals over time.
Yeah. I mean, if your food's contaminated, that's one thing. You're cooking your food on something that's contaminated, that's another. You're putting personal care products on your skin every single day, multiple times a day, that's another thing. You can see how this adds up very quickly without even really realizing it.
100%. That's funny. On Instagram one time, I saw this study that they were doing with a rat, and they basically put a rat in a pool. Once again, these rats, poor rats. I do not like rats, but man, they put it in a pool of water, and there's one little way out that the rat has to find the water. And the rat's swimming and swimming in this first video, and it finds the way out pretty quickly, pretty efficiently, and it gets out of the pool. The rats do not like to be in water, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen this.
The second rat, they give it a ton of sugar, just like the amount of sugar that we eat as humans, I guess, in the normal standard American diet.
In rat amounts, though?
In rat amounts, yeah. They probably take it down.
Yeah.
The same equivalent amount.
Yes.
And you watch this poor rat go in the water, and it is completely lost on where it is, especially when you compare it to the first rat that just got out in seconds. It looks like it's been bonked on the head, like dazed and confused. It cannot find its way out. So Talking through this reminded me of that study as well, and understanding the impacts of these different chemicals, sugar included, on our bodies.
Yeah.
Have you seen that video?
Yeah, I have seen that video. It's very, very sad.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy watching it.
No, you're like rooting for the rat.
I know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yep. Crazy. But that leads me into what I would consider to be the biggest impact of the lack of information going on in this study is the combination effects of these drugs. When you mix multiples of these different chemicals together, what is the impact that it has on our bodies? They're not taking all 40,000 and injecting it into the rat and then seeing what happens. That's impossible. You can't do that. And they're not doing that. But you know who is? Us. Humans are doing this. Humans are living this experiment right now, and we are seeing the consequences of it. We're seeing obesity increase. We're seeing anxiety and depression go up. We're seeing more and more people just feel horrible, increased cancer risk, everything. It's amazing to me that the FDA is not regulating this, and the experiment, which is going on right now, is us.
We're just one giant experiment.
Mm-hmm. We're the rat swimming in the pool, dazed and confused, trying to find its way out. That is us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think we just end the episode right there. That is crazy. We are a living human experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, I guess, the world, but specifically America, it's not going so well. Everything is on the rise. All these diseases are on the rise. Anxiety, depression, all of this. And I'm not saying that these chemicals are the sole reason, but you have to believe it's a big part of it, a really, really big impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
My question for you is, we've talked about this previously. We've talked about how there are a lot of ingredients that are banned in other countries that are allowed in the United States, a lot of artificial colors and other preservatives and things like that. Are other countries more strict when it comes to these chemicals, or do they treat it the same way as the FDA? How does it work?
It's funny. You always hear the US is the fattest country in the world by any sort of obesity metric. Fattest.
Yeah.
And there's a reason. It is because, at least in the EU, they take a completely different approach to this. They do what is called a do no harm approach. And it's actually a doctor's oath. All doctors have to take a do no harm approach. They have to protect their patients. But I think it's funny. The EU food regulator takes the same approach. And basically what it means is that whenever a new chemical is introduced, they assume it causes harm. Anything that's new, you have to prove that it is safe over time. Whereas the US, you have to you can just put it into the market and then see what it does and use the humans as the experiment. The EU says, nope, we need to put this on some sort of whitelist that's allowed. And you have to prove to me that this chemical does not have any adverse impacts on the people that are going to be using it. And that is exactly why I didn't even know this until we started looking into it. When we did that episode comparing foods in the UK to the US, there was such a shorter list of ingredients. All of those chemicals that we saw in the US version of the same food did not exist in the UK version. And this is exactly why.
Yeah, the same product, ketchup, cereal, whatever it was, same product, same brand, but there's different ingredients in the US versus in Europe. And it sounds like it's the same thing with this. They are not allowing a lot of these chemicals into their food, into their products, into their pans, cookware. So they are much more strict.
They are. And you may be sitting here, and if this is your first episode, you probably think I'm crazy. You think we're probably both crazy. You think we're some sort of conspiracy theorists out there. And let me just leave you with one final thought on this whole FDA limits thing. And it is around big tobacco. For decades, big tobacco convinced the world that smoking cigarettes was healthy. It was cool to smoke cigarettes. They would use doctors in their advertisements. And I actually pulled one up, and it's for Camel, the cigarette brand. And it says more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. It's funny. It reminds me of toothpaste. Like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend this toothpaste. It's crazy that these were the advertisements that were going on for decades. And everyone just assumed that was correct. That was right. Because they didn't know any better. They put their trust in government and big companies. And both of those institutions really just took advantage of people. And I think that they're just running the same exact playbook back again for these chemicals in our foods. And in 40, 50 years, we're going to look back at this time and think it is insane that people used to consume all these different chemicals. But a lot of people just don't know better because they're being betrayed. And so if you think I'm crazy, completely understand. But just think about big tobacco for a second, and I think you'll wrap your head around it.
I don't think you're crazy.
You don't think you?
I've been seeing a lot of social media posts recently about, I mean, I guess over the past year or so, they basically just say, do the opposite of whatever the government tells you to do. Now, normally it's specific to food. It's like the government tells you to stop eating red meat, eat more red meat.
Yeah.
The government tells you to stop eating eggs because it's high in cholesterol. Eat more eggs.
Yeah.
Same thing with butter. They say stop eating butter, eat plant-based butter, eat vegetable oils. Do the opposite. Eat more butter, eat more saturated fat. Don't go outside because it's going to cause skin cancer. And if you do, make sure you're completely covered and wearing 7 layers of sunscreen. Mm-hmm. Do the opposite. Go outside and get sun. It's amazing. I mean, I think a lot of people are waking up to this now and realizing, hey, maybe we shouldn't be listening to the government for dietary recommendations and outside recommendations.
Yeah, just lifestyle recommendations.
Yeah. And I think the same thing can be done here. Don't listen to them when it comes to these chemicals, basically. But if you're prioritizing real whole food, if you're getting outside in the sun and nature, if you're ensuring you're putting real ingredient personal care products on your skin, on your hair, on your body, then you don't need to worry about this. You don't even block it out. That's what I do. I don't listen to any of this nonsense. Crazy topic.
It's insane. And shout out to Justin Mayers, who we used a lot of this research from. He wrote a newsletter on this topic. And so we pulled a lot from there. And just exposing the truth, I think, is really important here. Having people understand what this process is like is not meant to incite fear into anyone. Everyone should know how the FDA regulates their own food because they're putting it in their body. And that is what the purpose of this is.
Mm-hmm. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the better. And yeah, we'll leave a link to Justin Mayer's newsletter down below. Kevin's forwarded me a bunch. I need to sign up for his newsletter, but Kevin's forwarded me a bunch of information and emails from him. They're amazing. He goes into depth on this in an easy to understand way too.
For sure. Yeah.
And he's the co-founder of Kettle and Fire.
Yep.
What other company? He founded a few other companies, right?
He did. Yeah. Another organic food company. Right now, he's actually working on TrueMed, which allows you to use your HSA on anything health related. So if you want some sort of exercise equipment, normally you'd have to use your credit card, but you can use your HSA, which is a tax advantage account.
Or a supplement or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to get him on the podcast as well.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So related to all of this, understanding how the FDA determines the legal limits of all of these chemicals is the RDA, or the recommended dietary allowance, on all of those different nutrition labels that you look at. Any food you look at has an RDA amount associated with it. And we want to understand, how do those amounts get determined as well? So Kyle, how does the regulators come up with those amounts?
So there's 4 steps basically that the regulators use to determine this RDA. And I'll give my thoughts about this whole process at the end. But first, they determine the nutrient needs. So the RDAs are derived from scientific data on specific nutrient needs for a variety of different populations. And then based off of that scientific data, they set daily value. So the FDA uses the RDA to set the daily value for nutrients. That's the thing you see on the back of packages when it says the nutrition facts, and it'll have a breakdown of different vitamins and minerals, and it'll tell you what percentage of that vitamin and mineral is meeting your RDA. And then once they determine that, they adjust it for caloric intake. And the daily values are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. That's kind of what they use for, general purposes. And then labeling. The food manufacturers calculate the percentage of the daily value that a serving of whatever their product is provides. And then, like I said, they display that on the nutrition facts label.
Yeah. So when you went through this, how do you look at these daily amounts? Because a lot of them, I feel like, are vitamin and minerals. It's things that we want to be including in our body. Do you use these at all?
Not really.
No.
No, not really. No. I've read about the RDA a lot, and it really seems like it is the minimum amount of whatever vitamin or mineral it is that we have to consume in order to not be deficient in it, in order to not develop a disease from being deficient in this specific vitamin or mineral. But that doesn't tell me what the optimal level is. That tells me what the minimum is to not be deficient. So I personally, I don't really look at the specific amount of every single vitamin and mineral that I'm consuming. I just prioritize real whole foods as much as I can and include a variety. That's why you want to include a variety of foods in your diet, because different foods have different vitamins and minerals in them. That's also a very big reason why I'm a huge fan of animal protein, specifically grass-fed meat, which is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can eat, along with pasture-raised eggs, also extremely nutrient-dense. If you look at a chart of the different vitamins and minerals that eggs, grass-fed beef contain, you're going to get a lot of vitamins and minerals just through that. So those are foods that I definitely prioritize on a daily basis, even grass-fed organs as well. Things like liver and heart from grass-fed, regeneratively raised cows, extremely, extremely nutrient-dense if you want the best bang for your buck. So I personally do not calculate this. I feel like I've looked at it before on, one of those calorie trackers, and it'll tell you the breakdown of the vitamins and minerals that you're consuming on a daily basis. I kind of just put in a rough estimate of what I eat in a day. And, I basically was checking all of the boxes, some a lot more than others, and some, a lot more than the RDA.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, if you don't measure it closely, because I don't. I never track vitamins and minerals that I'm consuming. How would I know where to supplement? So like vitamin C, if I don't think I'm getting enough vitamin C from diet alone, then I'll probably want to supplement with a vitamin C supplement.
Mm-hmm.
How would I know to do that? Should people be looking at these different amounts and just at least having a rough idea of how much vitamin C, vitamin D they're consuming?
I'd say it's not a bad idea to kind of do what I did and go on something like, I'm trying to think of one of the names of one of the calorie tracker. What is it? Fitness Pal or
MyFitnessPal? Yeah.
MyFitnessPal, something like that. Chronometer, I think, is another one.
Mm-hmm.
You go on there, put in just a rough estimate of what you eat in a day, and you can easily recognize patterns and see like, oh, whoa, I'm not, sticking with your example, I'm not getting nearly enough vitamin C as I should be. Go on Google, real foods that are high in vitamin C. Oh, look, lemons, oranges, things like that. Okay, let me start putting lemon juice in my water. Boom. And then you're starting to get some vitamin C. So I would always prioritize real whole foods when you can.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you are unable to get the amount of vitamins and minerals you need from foods, then go for supplements. And, that's a topic for another day, going into depth on supplements, because a lot of them are coming from synthetic forms as opposed to real whole foods, which the one supplement I will recommend that is really, really good is organ meat supplement, because that includes a wide variety of vitamins and minerals that are bioavailable, meaning our body absorbs them well because it's coming from real whole food. Another example of that is vitamin C. If you're going to get vitamin C, you don't want to use something that is coming from ascorbic acid, which is basically the synthetic form of vitamin C. You want to go for something that is coming from acerola juice powder, which is a natural food that is high in vitamin C, things like that. That's kind of, across the board what you want to look for. But yeah, that's where I would start. I'd say go find one of these things, just put in a rough estimate. And another thing you can do is get your blood drawn as well and test for a lot of these vitamins and minerals to see where your levels are at, see what you're deficient in, supplement as necessary. But, as always, go for real food when you can.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about Function Health recently, I think 2 episodes ago, about how you can get your blood tested and drawn every 6 months, not too often, and it'll give you a great idea on where you fall. So it's in line with what you're talking about. Don't just take everything you see at face value. Understand what it means for you. Customize a meal plan that is built around your needs. And that's really the key takeaway here for me.
Yeah. Have you ever done anything like that? Putting in all the, like what you eat on a day?
Not for vitamins and minerals. I've done it for recommendations around carbs, fats, and
protein.
Protein. Yeah. Carbs, fats.
That reminds me, that's another thing. The RDA for protein, I don't know it off the top of my head, but they calculate the RDA for protein based off of how much you weigh in kilograms, I want to say. And the RDA for protein is so low compared to what a lot of functional doctors and experts that I've listened to recommend. We've talked about it before, but normally they recommend a gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that's kind of on the higher side, but that's like, if you're getting that, then you're doing good. So for me, for example, I'm around 160, 165 pounds. I would be trying to get 160, 165 grams of protein on a daily basis. If I calculated the RDA for me of protein that I should be getting on a daily basis, I think it's maybe close to like 40 or 50 grams or something like that.
Yeah.
So drastically lower than what I've learned from a lot of experts that I trust. I can't say I trust the government telling me how much protein to consume, but I do trust a lot of experts that I've learned a lot of information out there that have made me feel a lot better in terms of my health.
Yeah. The RDA for protein is 0.36 grams per pound. So it's about a third of your body weight is the RDA. So if you'd followed that and compared it to what you're aiming for, that 160, 165 pounds, it's, what is that? 40, 50?
You said 0.36?
0.36.
So that's 60 grams of protein.
60 grams. So
60 grams of protein on a daily basis. And I'm getting close to 160 when I try.
Big difference.
I mean, I'm thinking of the meal that I just had. I just had 7 eggs. It was about 6 grams.
7 eggs in one sitting? How many cartons of eggs do you go through a week?
A few. I've been eating a lot of eggs recently. They're good.
Oh my gosh. Scrambled?
I took a little break. Yeah, scrambled. I took a little break from eggs. Yeah. I don't know why. I just wasn't buying them. I was just like eating a ton of beef. And the past few months, I've been loading back up on eggs. I'm like, man, eggs are so good.
Dang, 7 eggs.
So yeah, I had 7 eggs, and there's about 6 to 7 grams of protein per egg. So that's 42 grams. I also had like 4 or 5 pieces of bacon, which is probably an extra 20 grams. So that was probably a 60 gram protein meal in just that. And according to the RDA, that's it. I'm good. I don't need to be consuming any more protein throughout the day. But I'm probably going to consume at least another pound of ground beef, which is 80 grams of protein. I'll probably consume even more than that. So I don't know. You do the math.
Yeah.
It is what it is, but
more than the RDA.
Prioritize protein. It's so important.
We just ordered a protein powder pancake mix from Just Ingredients. It just got here. Just tried it out. Delicious. And each pancake, I think it's every 2 pancakes. Each 2 pancakes has like 19 grams of protein. Crazy. Because it's just the mix. And then we added eggs to it actually. So you even get more protein, than the recommended. And butter. I think that was it. There was not much to it. Super easy to make and a good source of protein.
And I believe it's whey protein is the...
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I think grass-fed whey protein.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Grass-fed, undenatured whey protein. Yeah, super high-quality source of protein. If you are trying to meet the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, if you're trying to meet that with whole foods and you're like, Kyle, I can't eat that much beef, eggs, chicken, fish, whatever it is, a grass-fed, undenatured whey protein pancake mix or protein smoothie drink is a great way to kind of meet that requirement.
Yep. And it's delicious.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Kevin.
Boom. Yeah.
It's time.
Let's get into some dessert.
What's for dessert? You go first on this one. I think I went first last week.
All right. So you've heard the saying, money can't buy happiness, right?
I have.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, will argue that it can buy happiness. But we just found the results of a study that determined the answer to this, lifelong question that people have. Can money buy happiness? So there's this concept called the universal basic income. It's a concept that's been thrown around that if you give everyone in the world a minimum amount of money, that they'll be happier, they'll be able to pursue whatever they want. And so they did this. They actually did this study with some people. It was in Illinois and Texas. They took 1,000 people and they gave them $1,000 a month for 3 years. And they studied them, just watched them, understood how their behavior changed based on this extra increase in income. And these were people that were making about $30,000 a year previously. So this was a substantial increase in their annual income. And what they found for these 1,000 people that they studied was that they worked less, they decreased their labor participation rate. They did not pursue better jobs. They did not pursue anything related to entrepreneurship. They spent more time on some leisure activities, but not productive leisure activities. And so basically what they were hoping to find is that people were happier, more productive, better individuals within their ecosystem. It didn't prove to be true at all. Basically, they got lazier, they didn't work hard, and they just took advantage of the extra $1,000 they received a month. So money does not buy you happiness. What does buy you happiness is investing in yourself, focusing on your health, being involved in a community. Those are the things that actually drive happiness intrinsically. And so this was just a really interesting, it just came out, I think the results of this study this week, that this UBI doesn't have any real impact on happiness.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Your health is the number one priority. Eat real food, which is what we talk about all the time. And yeah, prioritize a community. I think that is so incredibly important. That is how you find true happiness.
Yeah. It reminded me of the Blue Zones study that was done.
Yep.
And the impact that being in a community, living with people, being surrounded by people that you care about has on your overall health. People lived so much longer because of the community that they had built around them.
Especially like-minded individuals, when you share the same beliefs and all thoughts and things like that.
Yep. So that's my dessert. So you don't need money. Just invest in other things.
That's a good dessert. That's a good reminder.
Yep. What's your dessert? What do you got?
My dessert is coming from that same girl that we mentioned a few weeks ago, the neuroscientist.
Oh, yeah.
That makes these quick little videos on Instagram. I'll just play it through my phone here and hold it up to the mic. But I just love little quick tips like this one that I'm about to share, that you can actually apply to your life, like immediately. And this is one that I heard earlier this week, I guess. And I was like, wow, that was super, super powerful. I find myself doing that all the time. And now I'm going to do this when I have these thoughts. And this will make more sense when I play this right now for you. Super interesting. Here we go.
Research shows that wiring the brain to believe in ourselves increases focus, enhances productivity, and helps to get us closer to our goals. So the first way that we can wire our brain for increased self-confidence is by checking our self-talk. If you are not talking to yourself like you are your best friend and biggest cheerleader, I would start. And a huge hack for doing this is using the put-up rule. Our brains are naturally biased toward negativity. So it is going to require 3 put-ups to offset every time that you put yourself down. Give yourself 3 compliments for every insult, no exceptions. Eventually, this will get wired into your brain, and complimenting yourself will be a reflex.
I'm going to cut off the video there.
Yeah.
Just that one tip.
I've never heard of put-ups.
Yeah, neither have I.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it.
Yeah, until this video. Yeah. So basically, if you find yourself thinking negative thoughts about yourself, anything negative, then you immediately want to basically give yourself 3 compliments. And eventually, like she said, this will rewire your brain. And every time you have a negative thought, you'll automatically, obviously it's going to take time and a lot of awareness of your thoughts. But eventually it'll become second nature. And once you have a negative thought, you'll give yourself 3 compliments. And then hopefully, the negative thoughts probably won't go away totally, but you're going to give yourself 3 compliments every time you have a negative one. And I watched that. I was like, whoa, like, again, that's something you can do immediately. And it's something I've just been doing over the past week or so. I thought it was a really, really good tip.
Have you noticed an impact?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Because when I have a negative thought, then I'll immediately go to 3 compliments and I'm like, oh, I feel better about myself now.
Yeah.
And I don't even think about that negative thought because now I'm thinking about the 3 positive things. So yeah, just in a week, I've noticed a difference.
Yeah. It's like people are often their own harshest critic. What I mean by that is like when you say, oh, I don't look good, or I didn't do well on that group project or whatever it is, that's not what other people are thinking. Honestly, people are often thinking about the work that they did or the impact that they had. And so you're the only one that's beating yourself up as much as you are. So if you can lift yourself up or like help increase the amount of positive energy that you have going on, it will make a massive impact. I love that.
Yeah. Obviously we talk about food a lot on this and ingredients and things like that. But I think, something that I've been learning about recently is just thoughts and just like that video, self-talk, stress, like that sort of thing. That is something I've been learning about more recently, and I'm sure we'll share a lot of that in the podcast episodes to come. But yeah, very, very, very interesting. I love learning about this stuff and the way the brain works and the way our bodies work.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Yeah. Put-ups.
Put-ups. All right. And that's going to be it for this episode. Remember, give yourself 3 compliments when you have any negative thought about yourself. Give yourself 3 compliments. That's going to be it for this episode. Make sure you leave a rating, a review on Spotify and Apple. Subscribe on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. We'll see you next week.